I'm Kelvin Thompson. Over the decades, I've learned a few things about blended course design, teaching, and learning, and I'm sharing them in this series of brief topical video nuggets. Today's nugget is blended design variables must be chosen carefully. Blended design variables must be chosen carefully. Good course design does not happen by accident, and that is particularly true of blended course design, where there are just so many more variables at play. First, as with all course design, it's imperative that for optimal effectiveness, blended learning must keep an eye on the end goal for learners. What are those learning outcomes? What do you want the students to walk away with? But with blended learning in particular, balancing student-centeredness with faculty friendliness is a helpful guidepost. For instance, designing blended courses can really amplify what the designing instructor does particularly well. Is the instructor particularly skillful at facilitating in-room, in-person discussions? Well, then let the instructor be very successful at that, and then complement that with the online activities serving a different function, or conversely, flip it around. The student experience in blended learning courses can be particularly active, particularly an emphasis on active learning if the design supports this. Blended draws upon more variables in design and teaching, but those variables in input need to be balanced with a very clear output for student learning and student success. Here are a couple of supporting tools for thinking about blended learning. First, from Dr. Tanya Joosten, is what she refers to as these 4 dialecticals for blended learning, 4 continua, 4 dimensions that she pictorially arranges here. Perhaps somewhat intuitively, the first 3, with blended learning, there is something of a midpoint between 2 extremes. Technology blended learning is, she represents as a kind of a midpoint between really robust technology or lean or no technology. Similarly, a midpoint between real time and anytime. Spatially, a midpoint between same place or different place. But intriguingly, Dr. Joosten emphasizes that pedagogically, good blended learning is always active. It's not some sort of milquetoast in between. It is deliberately active. This sets us up to think through another visual that I found useful throughout the years, what I think of as building blocks for blended learning. First, let's assume that some common elements to any course design, at least 3 conceptually, are how we present content, how we provide opportunities for interaction between and among learners and instructors, and how we assess whether and to what extent learning has taken place. Content, interaction, assessment. With a blended course design context, those content, interaction, and assessment decisions, of which there are many in any single modality course, in a blended course, there are more facets to consider. For instance, content, interaction, assessment. Do some of those take place in person and others online? Which ones? But in person and online isn't enough. In a 4 walls and a door context, there can be a lot of technology usage or there can be none. Similarly, online, we tend to think of as a technology-rich environment, but just because a course design element is introduced or input or shared online doesn't mean that the learner has to be chained to the computer the entire time. There may be away from computer, away from device opportunities. So is the content presentation or the interaction or the assessment online, is that unplugged or is it technology enabled? And while it's not depicted here, because it's hard to find yet another dimension, the online dimension, is it asynchronous or is it synchronous, real-time online? That's yet another element. Many, many, many um, input design decisions, and yet all of those decisions are aligned and pointed in the same direction: active student learning. I think of sometimes those reality cooking or baking shows like the Great British Baking Show or something like that, where you have amazingly well-equipped kitchens and all the ingredients someone could possibly want, and yet the ingredients and the equipment are not enough, right? You have to be skillful. There has to be a plan and how you're going to use the ingredients and the equipment. And there has to be skill in the implementation of that plan. And the same is true of blended course design. How can instructor strengths be leveraged while student needs are kept in the forefront of blended course design? That's the guiding question. And there are many, many, many more variables to draw upon in blended course design than when designing an in-person or an online course. You might want to dig a little deeper on this topic. So here are two quick resources to consult. First, from Dr. Tanya Joosten and colleagues, Planning for a Blended Future, a research-driven guide for educators. This dialectical and other constructs are introduced and unpacked there. And an invited session that I presented during a blended course design summit of the Online Learning Consortium. There are a number of aspects of quality and course design and quality blended course design all unpacked there as well. The slides and the audio recording are available at that URL. That's it for this blended learning segment, but there is just so much more to unearth. So keep coming back and keep exploring on your own so that we can make blended the best that it can be.